Comfort is one of the most dangerous things a human being can ever get addicted to. It doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't feel dangerous. In fact, it feels like safety, like peace, like control. But that is exactly why it's so powerful and so deceptive. Because comfort doesn't stop you with force. It stops you with permission. It whispers to you in a calm voice and tells you, stay here, you're fine, don't push too hard, don't risk too much. And slowly, without even realizing it, you begin to shrink your life to fit inside a space that was never meant for you. Think about it honestly. Most people are not stuck because they lack opportunity. They are stuck because they have made peace with less. They have negotiated with their potential. They have reached a silent agreement with their fear that says, I won't push you if you don't push me. And that agreement feels safe in the beginning. It feels like balance, but over time, it becomes a cage made of routine. You wake up at the same time. You think the same thoughts. You repeat the same conversations. You avoid the same risks. And you call it stability. But stability without growth is just slow decay. A life that doesn't expand begins to contract. And what starts as comfort eventually becomes limitation. No one tells you this directly, but comfort is not your friend. It is your natural resistance to becoming more. It protects your current identity, even if your current identity is not enough for your future. And that is where the conflict begins. Because inside every human being, there is a version of themselves that wants more discipline, more freedom, more impact, more meaning, and more meaning. But comfort steps in and says, why change? You've survived this far. And survival is not the same as living, You can survive in the same place for years and never truly grow. You can survive in relationships that drain you. You can survive in work that doesn't inspire you. You can survive in habits that slowly weaken you. But survival is not the goal. You were not built just to survive. You were built to expand, to challenge, to rise beyond what you currently are. The truth is, comfort slowly rewires your expectations. At first, you know you can do more. You know you should do more. But after enough delay, you stop expecting more from yourself. And the moment you stop expecting more, you stop expecting more. That is how powerful comfort is. It doesn't just slow your progress, it changes your identity. And that is why so many people feel stuck even when nothing is physically stopping them. There is no locked door, there is no visible barrier, but internally they have accepted limits that no one imposed on them. They've built invisible walls out of routine, fear, and repetition. Ask yourself something honestly right now. When was the last time you did something that truly challenged you? Not something that looked productive, but something that actually stretched you, scared you, forced you to grow. If you have to think too long for that answer, then comfort has already taken more from you than you realize. And here's the part most people don't want to accept. Comfort doesn't announce its arrival. It enters quietly. It starts by convincing you to delay. Do it tomorrow. Then it becomes, do it next week. Then it becomes, maybe it's not that important. And finally, it becomes, this is just who I am. That is how a powerful life gets reduced into an ordinary one, not through failure, but through postponement. But there is another side to this truth. Comfort only has power over you as long as you choose it unconsciously. The moment you become aware of it, you regain control, because awareness breaks illusion. When you can see comfort for what it really is, not safety, but stagnation, you stop worshiping it. And when you stop worshiping comfort, something powerful begins to happen. You start choosing challenge over ease. You start choosing growth over repetition. You start choosing discomfort that builds you instead of comfort that weakens you. That is the beginning of transformation. Not when life gets easier, but when you decide to stop avoiding what makes you stronger. And maybe right now, there is a part of you resisting this message. That's normal. That resistance is comfort defending itself. But beneath that resistance, there is another voice, a quieter one, a stronger one, a real one. And it's asking you a very simple question. How long will you trade your potential for temporary ease? Because every time you choose comfort over growth, you are not staying the same. You are stepping back from who you could become. Delay is one of the most expensive habits a human being can ever develop, and the tragedy is that most people don't even realize they're paying for it every single day. It doesn't show up like a bill in your inbox. It doesn't arrive with a warning. It builds quietly, moment by moment, choice by choice, until one day you look around and wonder how so much time passed while so little changed. And it always begins the same way. I'll start tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. I need more time. I just have to figure a few things out first. On the surface, these sound reasonable, they sound responsible, but underneath them is something far more dangerous than lack of preparation. It's avoidance disguised as planning. It's fear wearing the mask of patience. And the longer you listen to it, the more convincing it becomes. But let's be honest with each other for a moment. Tomorrow never arrives the way you think it will. It always comes with new excuses, new distractions, new responsibilities that feel more urgent than your dreams. And suddenly, what you promised yourself yesterday gets pushed again and again until it becomes a pattern. And patterns become identity. This is how delay changes a person without them noticing. It doesn't take away your ability. It takes away your momentum. And without momentum, even the strongest potential becomes heavy. Even the clearest vision becomes blurry. Even the most powerful dream starts to feel distant, like something that belongs to another version of you. Think about the moments in your life where you felt the strongest urge to change. That moment when everything inside you said, this is it. I need to do something different. You felt it clearly. You saw it clearly. But then delay stepped in. Not aggressively, not loudly, but gently. It said, not today. Today is too hard. Today is too busy. Start when things settle, but things never settle. Life doesn't pause for your preparation. It doesn't wait for your confidence to grow. It moves constantly. And while you are waiting for the perfect moment, life is already moving past you. Every great loss in a person's life is rarely sudden. It is gradual. It is the result of thousands of small delays that felt harmless in the moment. A workout postponed, a decision avoided, a conversation delayed, a risk ignored. None of them seem important alone, but together they create a life that feels smaller than the one you once imagined. And here is the truth that most people avoid. Delay always feels safe at first, but it always ends in regret later. Because what you delay today doesn't disappear. It accumulates, it becomes more emotionally charged, it becomes harder to face. And the longer you wait, the more courage it requires to finally begin. That is why people don't start. Not because they can't, but because they have made the starting point so far away in their mind that it feels unreachable. But let me tell you something that changes everything. The perfect time you are waiting for is a myth. It does not exist. There is no moment in life where fear disappears and confidence arrives fully formed. There is only action, and through action, confidence is built. You don't think your way into a better life, you move your way into. And the longer you delay movement, the more your mind convinces you that movement is impossible. It creates stories. I'm not disciplined enough. I don't have the resources. Others are ahead of me, but all of those stories are built on one foundation: postponed action. And here is where everything shifts, because the moment you break delay, even slightly, something powerful wakes up inside you. The energy you thought you lost returns. The clarity you thought you didn't have begins to appear, not because life changed, but because you did. One decision, one action, one step, that is all it takes to interrupt a cycle that has been controlling you for years. But it requires honesty. It requires you to stop negotiating with your future. Because every time you say later, you are not just delaying a task, you are delaying a transformation. You are postponing the version of yourself that only exists on the other side of action. And deep down, you already know this. That's why delay never feels completely peaceful. Even when you are resting, there is a small pressure inside you, a reminder, a quiet discomfort that is not stress, that is awareness. That is your potential knocking, reminding you that it is still waiting. So ask yourself, how many times have you heard that knock and ignored it? How many versions of yourself have you delayed becoming because you convinced yourself that tomorrow would be easier than today? Now look at where that has brought you. And more importantly, ask yourself where it is taking you if nothing changes. Because delay does not just steal time, it steals identity, it steals confidence, it steals belief in yourself. And once belief is weakened, even simple actions start to feel heavy, but there is still a turning point available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. The moment you stop waiting for permission, your life begins to shift. The moment you act despite uncertainty, you break the pattern. And the moment you break the pattern, you reclaim power you didn't realize you had lost. Your habits are not just actions you repeat, they are the silent architects of who you are becoming. Most people think identity is something fixed, something you are born with, something written in stone. But that is not the truth. Identity is built in the smallest decisions you make when no one is watching, when there is no applause, no pressure, no audience, just you and your choices. And if you look closely at your life right now, you will realize something powerful and uncomfortable at the same time. You are not what you say you are. You are what you repeatedly do. Not once, not occasionally, repeatedly, because repetition is the language of identity. It is how your brain learns who you are supposed to be. Every habit you perform is a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. And over time, those votes become a result. They become a lifestyle. They become a standard. And eventually, they become your reality. Think about it. A person does not become successful because of one powerful decision. They become successful because they repeatedly choose discipline over distraction, focus over noise, action over hesitation. And on the other side, a person does not become stuck because of one mistake. They become stuck because they repeatedly choose comfort over challenge, delay over action, excuses over responsibility. That is how powerful habits are. They are not just behaviors, they are identity reinforcement systems. And here is where most people miss the truth. You are always reinforcing something. Even when you think you are doing nothing, you are reinforcing avoidance. You are reinforcing avoidance. Even when you think you are resting, you are reinforcing patterns. Even when you think you are just relaxing, you are either building discipline or weakening it. There is no neutral ground. You are always becoming. And the question is not whether you are changing. The question is in which direction. Now let's go deeper. Most people try to change their life by focusing on outcomes. They say, I want more money, I want better health, I want success, I want respect. But they ignore the foundation that produces all of those things, habits, because you cannot separate results from identity. And you cannot separate identity from habits. If your daily habits are small, your identity becomes small. If your daily habits are inconsistent, your identity becomes unstable. If your daily habits are disciplined, your identity becomes powerful. It is that simple and that demanding, and yet people often try to change their life without changing themselves. They want a new result while keeping the same routine. They want a different future while protecting the same patterns. But life does not work that way. If you keep thinking like someone who avoids difficulty, you will continue to live like someone who avoids growth. If you keep acting like someone who waits for motivation, you will remain someone who depends on external energy instead of internal discipline. And here is the hard truth most people avoid. Your current habits are perfectly designed for your current life, not your desired life, your current one. So if you want a different life, you cannot negotiate with the habits that created your current one. You must replace them, not adjust them, not slightly improve them, replace them, and that replacement is uncomfortable. Because habits are emotional, they are tied to familiarity, they are tied to identity. Even habits that hurt you feel safe because they are known. And the human mind often chooses what is familiar over what is beneficial. That is why change feels like resistance. Not because you are incapable, but because your current identity is fighting to stay alive. But let me ask you something directly. How long will you protect habits that are not protecting your future? How long will you repeat actions that you already know are keeping you stuck? Because every time you say, just this once, you are negotiating with your potential. Every time you delay discipline, you are reinforcing weakness. And every time you ignore your higher standards, you are lowering your identity without even realizing it. But the reverse is also true. Every time you choose discipline when it is inconvenient, you strengthen your identity. Every time you act without motivation, you build internal power. Every time you follow through when no one is watching, you become someone you can rely on. And that is the real transformation, not external success, but internal trust. Because the strongest people are not those who are always motivated. They are the ones who have trained themselves to act regardless of emotion. They do not wait for the perfect mood. They do not wait for the perfect conditions. They understand that identity is built in action, not intention. So if you want to change your life, stop focusing only on goals. Start focusing on repetition, because repetition is what turns effort into identity. And identity is what determines everything else. You do not rise to your potential in one moment. You rise to it in repeated choices that slowly reshape who you are. And right now, in this moment, your habits are either pulling you toward the life you want or quietly keeping you away from it. Fear is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life. Most people treat it like a stop sign, like a solid wall placed in front of their future, something that says, you cannot go any further. But fear has never been a wall. Fear is a filter. It does not block you. It reveals you. It reveals what you are willing to do when you are uncomfortable. It reveals how badly you want the life you keep talking about. It reveals whether your dream is a wish or a commitment. Because when fear shows up, and it always shows up at the edge of growth, it is not there to destroy you. It is there to expose you. It is there to expose you. And here is the truth most people never accept. Fear does not appear when you are doing something impossible. It appears when you are doing something meaningful. You do not feel fear sitting in comfort. You feel fear when you step toward change, when you move toward discipline, when you move toward uncertainty. When you move toward uncertainty, that means fear is not a warning that you are in danger. It is a signal that you are finally moving in the right direction. But most people misunderstand that signal. They interpret it as a command to stop. So they retreat, they hesitate, they delay. And in that moment, fear wins, not because it is stronger, but because they misread its purpose. Let's go deep into this. Fear filters people into two categories. On one side, it filters out those who were never serious, those who like the idea of change, but not the discomfort of it. Those who wanted results without resistance, those who dreamed, but only as long as the dream did not demand sacrifice. And on the other side, fear reveals those who are ready, not fearless ready. Because readiness does not mean the absence of fear. It means action despite fear. It means understanding that fear is part of the path, not a barrier to it. Think about any moment in your life where you truly grew. Not when things were easy, but when things were uncertain. There was fear there before the decision, before the conversation, before the risk, before the first step. But you moved anyway, and on the other side of that fear, you did not find destruction, you found expansion. That is the pattern of growth. Every level of your life requires you to pass through fear, not avoid it. And yet, most people spend their entire life trying to build a future without ever walking through the very thing that unlocks it. Fear is not there to protect your comfort. It is there to test your commitment. And the moment you understand that, everything changes. Because now fear is no longer something happening to you. It is something happening for you. It is asking you a question. Are you the person who talks about change? Or are you the person who moves toward it? And that question is asked every time you hesitate, every time you feel resistance, every time you stand at the edge of something unfamiliar. But here is what separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. The interpretation of fear. Most people interpret fear as danger, but those who rise interpret fear as direction. They understand that the presence of fear is proof that they are not standing still. They are expanding, they are tapping into territory their old identity has never entered before. And yes, it will feel uncomfortable, it will feel uncertain, it will feel like you are not ready. But readiness is not a feeling, it is a decision. You do not wait to feel ready. You act, and in action, readiness is created. Fear will always try to negotiate with you. It will say, wait until tomorrow. It will say, prepare a little more. It will say, what if you fail? But it never asks the opposite question. What if you succeed beyond what you imagine? Because fear is not designed to show you possibilities. It is designed to protect your current state. Even if your current state is limiting you, even if your current state is below your potential, and that is why you cannot trust fear as a guide. You can only recognize it as a filter. It filters out hesitation. It filters out excuses. It filters out people who were never going to move anyway. And what remains is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage. And courage is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not dramatic. It is not always visible to others. Sometimes courage is simply getting up when everything in you wants to stay the same. Sometimes courage is starting when you feel behind. Sometimes courage is continuing when nothing around you is giving you confirmation. But every time you choose courage, something shifts inside you. You begin to realize that fear has no authority over your actions unless you give it that authority. And slowly, you stop reacting to fear and start responding to it. You begin to move with it rather than against it. And in that shift, your entire life trajectory begins to change. There comes a point in every person's life where they can no longer carry the weight of who they used to be. Not because that version of them was bad, but because it was incomplete. It was built for survival, not for expansion. It was built for protection, not for purpose. And if you are honest with yourself, you already feel it, that quiet pressure inside, that sense that something in you has outgrown the life you are currently living. But here's the difficult part. Most people don't change when they outgrow themselves. They resist it. They hold on. They cling to old habits, old identities, old ways of thinking, even when those things no longer fit who they are becoming, because outgrowing yourself is not comfortable. It is not clean. It is not immediate. It fee. Like confusion. It feels like contradiction. One part of you wants to rise, and another part of you wants to stay safe. One part of you wants to stay safe. One part of you wants familiarity. And in that tension, most people freeze. But growth was never meant to feel familiar. If your future self felt comfortable inside your current life, then you wouldn't need to grow at all. You would already be there. The discomfort you feel is not a mistake. It is evidence. Evidence that you are standing between who you were and who you are becoming. And yet, many people misunderstand this stage of life. They think something is wrong with them because they no longer enjoy the things they used to enjoy. They think they are lost because their old routines no longer feel satisfying. They think they are broken because their previous identity no longer feels like home. But nothing is broken. Something is evolving. Something is evolving. And evolution always begins with discomfort. Outgrowing yourself means you are no longer aligned with the limitations that once defined you. The thoughts that once shaped your decisions begin to feel too small. The environment that once felt normal begins to feel restrictive. The conversations that once entertained you begin to feel empty. It is not that the world changed, it is that you changed. But here's where most people stop. Instead of stepping into the new identity, they try to fix the old one. They try to polish habits that should be replaced. They try to improve patterns that should be abandoned. They try to revive motivation for a version of life they have already outgrown. And that is where stagnation begins, because you cannot upgrade your life while protecting an outdated version of yourself. At some point, you have to choose. Either you stay loyal to comfort or you become loyal to growth. And growth always requires sacrifice. It requires you to let go of identities that once gave you security. It requires you to release behaviors that once made you feel safe. It requires you to stop defending habits that no longer serve your direction. And that release is painful, not because you are losing something valuable, but because you are stepping into something unfamiliar. But listen closely. Every level of your life will demand a version of you that does not exist yet. And if you refuse to become that version, you will keep repeating the same level over and over again, wondering why nothing changes. Outgrowing yourself is not an accident. It is a signal that your current identity has reached its limit. And when that signal appears, you have two choices. You can shrink back into familiarity, or you can step forward into uncertainty. Most people shrink. Not because they lack potential, but because they are afraid of letting go of what they have already mastered. They would rather be confident in a small identity than uncertain in a larger one. But confidence in limitation is still limitation. Real growth begins when you are willing to become a beginner again, when you are willing to be uncomfortable again, when you are willing to be misunderstood again, because every transformation requires you to step into a version of yourself that others may not recognize immediately. And that is okay, because you are not here to remain recognizable. You are here to evolve, but evolution demands courage. It demands honesty. It demands the willingness to admit, I am no longer who I used to be, and I cannot live like I used to live, and I cannot live like I used to live. And the moment you accept that truth, something powerful happens. You stop trying to return to the old version of yourself. You stop negotiating with your past. You stop waiting for old habits to feel right again. And instead, you start building alignment with who you are becoming. And yes, it will feel like loss at first, but it is not loss, it is transition. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. And everything you shed is making space for something stronger, clearer, and more aligned with your future. There is a difference between people who dream about change and people who actually live it. And that difference is not talent, not opportunity, not even intelligence. It is discipline, because motivation is a feeling, but discipline is a decision. Motivation rises and falls like the tide. It is unpredictable, emotional, temporary. But discipline is steady. It does not depend on how you feel. It depends on who you have decided to become. And this is where most people lose the battle without even realizing it. They wait for motivation like it is going to arrive one day and carry them into a new life. They wait for energy, for inspiration, for the perfect mood, for the right moment. But life does not change through waiting. Life changes through action taken when waiting would have been easier. Discipline is choosing the difficult thing when no one is watching and when nothing is forcing you. It is getting up when your mind says stay down. It is continuing when your emotions say quit. It is doing the work when there is no applause, no reward, no immediate result. And that is exactly why discipline builds people into something stronger than motivation ever could. Because motivation is fragile. It depends on conditions. A good day, a good mood, a good environment, but discipline is built in contradiction to conditions. It says, I will do it anyway. And that anyway is where real transformation lives. Think about the people you admire, the ones who seem consistent, focused, unstoppable. It is not because they always feel like doing the work. It is because they stopped negotiating with how they feel. They made a decision that their actions would no longer be controlled by their emotions. And that decision, repeated daily, became their identity. But for most people, emotions are in charge. If they feel tired, they stop. If they feel discouraged, they pause. If they feel distracted, they drift. And slowly, without realizing it, their life becomes a reflection of their most inconsistent moments. Not their potential, not their dreams, but their emotional fluctuations. And here is the hard truth. Your emotions are not designed to lead your life. They are designed to respond to it. When you let them lead, your direction becomes unstable. When you let discipline lead, your direction becomes clear. Discipline is not punishment. It is not restriction. It is not suffering for the sake of suffering. Discipline is alignment. It is aligning your daily actions with your long-term identity. It is saying, I will act like the person I am becoming, not the person I feel like being today. And that is where everything shifts. Because the moment you choose discipline over emotion, you step out of reaction and into creation. You are no longer reacting to how you feel. You are creating who you are. And that is a level of control most people never experience because they never break free from emotional decision making. Let's be clear. Discipline is not easy. If it were easy, everyone would live at their highest potential. Discipline requires resistance. It requires you to override comfort. It requires you to act when your mind is negotiating every possible excuse. But every time you override that resistance, you become stronger than the version of you that wanted to quit. And that strength accumulates. One discipline choice does not change your life, but repeated discipline choice reshape your identity. And once your identity shifts, your results have no choice but to follow. This is why discipline always outlasts motivation, because motivation starts strong but fades quickly. Discipline starts quietly but grows stronger every time it is used. It is not about intensity. It is about consistency. And consistency is what separates wishful thinking from real transformation. You cannot build a powerful life on occasional effort. You cannot build success on random bursts of energy. You cannot build confidence on unpredictable behavior. You build all of those things through repetition, through structure, through showing up when it is inconvenient, when it is boring, when it is difficult. And here is something most people never realize. Discipline does not just change your results, it changes your relationship with yourself. Because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you build trust within yourself. You build trust within yourself. And every time you break that promise, you weaken it. So the real question is not whether you are motivated. The real question is whether you are reliable to yourself. Because a life of power is not built on how you feel. It is built on whether you can trust yourself to act regardless of how you feel. And once that trust is built, everything else becomes possible. Confidence becomes natural. Progress becomes steady. Growth becomes inevitable. Viewer engagement. Right now, ask yourself honestly, what is one thing you keep postponing that your disciplined self would have already started without hesitation? Because your answer to that question is not just an insight, it is your next step forward.